in the heart of the sprawling capital of the Varelian Empire, where crystalline spires pierced the violet-hued sky and gravity-defying gardens spiraled around palace towers like living jewelry, lived Princess Lysara, a woman whose beauty was matched only by the cold weight of her solitude. Her skin shimmered like twilight amethyst, her long hair fell like spun moonlight, and her eyes held the sorrow of 1,000 silent battles. She had been expected to wed a warrior prince from the Zorith Dominion, one whose bloodline thrummed with ancient power and whose claws could rend starships in half. Instead, she returned from the Edgeworlds with a human, a quiet, sun-browned man named Corwin Vale, whose only armor was a tattered field jacket and whose greatest weapon seemed to be a dry sense of humor. The court mocked them both, though mostly him. Human, the weakest of the fringe species, with no bioenhancements, no plasma glands, not even a second heart. He couldn't channel cosmic energy through his palms. He couldn't breathe methane. He couldn't even grow scales in the desert sun like the lowest Varelian street sweepers. Yet here he stood, beside their princess, in the royal atrium of the celestial spire, wearing borrowed silks that hung awkwardly on his frame and a crooked smile that refused to fade. Corwin knew well the whispers. The pet, they called him. The ornament. The mortal mistake. He pretended not to notice as nobles accidentally spilled nectar wine on his boots during feasts or forgot to translate alien dialects when he asked simple questions. He smiled through it all, because Lysara's hand, when it brushed his in private, trembled with something deeper than shame. It trembled with hope. And Corwin, who had once patched up wounded rebels on the ash dunes of Xylos 9 using scavenged medgel and duct tape, knew the value of hope better than most. Their union had begun not with grand romance, but with desperation. During the Battle of the Shattered Moons, Lysara's skiff had been shot down behind enemy lines. Corwin, then a field medic with the Terran Coalition, found her half buried in crimson sand, her breathing shallow, a plasma burn searing through her side. He carried her for 3 days across dunes that shifted like living beasts, sharing his last water, singing off-key earth songs to keep her conscious. She woke in a makeshift shelter, her first words not of pain, but of wonder. "You stayed." He hadn't expected gratitude, only a patient who lived. But when she looked at him, it was as if she saw something no one else ever had. Not weakness, but stubborn, quiet strength. Now, in the palace, that same strength felt invisible. Until the day the Grand Senate convened to choose the next imperial regent. The Emperor, Lysara's father, the once mighty Forlac the Unbroken, had fallen into a mystic coma during a failed communion with the ancestral core, the living heart of Varelian governance. For weeks the court teetered on chaos. The throne could not sit empty. Custom dictated that the heir, Lysara, must either take the throne herself or name a consort to rule as regent until she bore a royal heir. But Lysara, bound by ancient oaths and wary of power-hungry generals, delayed. That delay became her undoing. Led by High Commander Zareth, a crimson-scaled warlord with fangs and a temper to match, the Senate convened an emergency tribunal. Zareth stood before the obsidian dais, his voice booming like thunder through the Hall of Echoes. "The princess has brought disgrace upon the bloodline," he declared, gesturing dismissively at Corwin, who stood quietly at the edge of the gallery. "She clings to a fragile, mortal thing while the empire bleeds. If she will not name a worthy consort, then the Senate shall choose one for her. Or better yet, appoint a regent of true Varelian metal." Murmurs rippled like wildfire. Some nobles nodded. Others cast pitying glances at Lysara. Corwin remained still, hands clasped behind his back, jaw tight but eyes calm. He knew this moment would come. He had spent nights studying Varelian law in the palace archives, not out of ambition, but out of love, because he refused to be a burden to the woman who saw him as more than he believed himself to be. When the Senate elder, a wizened matriarch with 6 eyes and a crown of black coral, turned to Corwin and said, "Mortal, you have no voice here." He simply stepped forward. "I do," he said, his voice soft but carrying. "Under Imperial Edict 47b, Section 3, any consort of royal blood, by marriage or decree, is entitled to petition for regency if the emperor is incapacitated and the heir has not yet ascended." Silence fell so heavily it nearly shattered the glass columns. Zareth laughed, a sound like grinding boulders. "You dare quote our law? You can barely pronounce our names." Corwin didn't flinch. "I've spent every night for the past 6 months learning your history, your codes, your songs. Not to impress you, but because I love your princess. And because I believe in what this empire could be, not what it's become." Lysara's breath caught. No one had ever spoken of the empire with such tenderness. Even her father had spoken of dominion, conquest, legacy, never potential. Zareth sneered. Love? A human feeling. Fleeting. Weak. What will you do when war comes again? Sing lullabies to our enemies. Corwin's eyes flickered toward the ceiling, where holographic records of past emperors scrolled endlessly. Your ancestors didn't win the Krell uprising with brute force. They won it by offering amnesty to defecting warlords, by integrating their tech, by feeding their children. Your own history values strategy over slaughter. Yet you've forgotten that. Zareth's claws flexed. Enough words. Prove your worth if you dare. And so began the trial of ascension, an ancient rite rarely invoked, where contenders for regency must pass 3 trials: wisdom, courage, and sovereignty. By law, any petitioner could be challenged to it. By custom, only those of noble blood ever attempted it. Yet Corwin, with nothing but a human heart and borrowed dignity, accepted. The first trial, wisdom, took place in the Chamber of Whispers. Corwin was given a puzzle sphere, a device that rearranged itself based on the user's deepest fears. Most warriors shattered it in frustration. Corwin, remembering nights on Xylos, 9 with dying comrades, simply spoke, "Fear doesn't solve problems. People do." He disassembled the sphere not with force, but by recognizing its pattern as a reflection of his own doubts, and gently reordering them. The sphere glowed gold. The chamber doors opened. The second trial, courage, unfolded in the arena of echoing souls, a circular pit where challengers faced illusions of their greatest regrets. Corwin saw himself failing Lysara in the desert, leaving her to die. He saw Earth burning, his family lost in the crossfire of galactic wars. But instead of fighting the illusions, he walked through them, saying aloud, "I did what I could. I'll keep doing it." The illusions bowed and faded. By now, even the skeptics watched in stunned silence. The third trial, sovereignty, was the most dangerous. It required the petitioner to sit upon the throne of resonance, a living artifact fused with the ancestral core. If the throne rejected the sitter, it would drain their life force until they were dust. Only those deemed worthy by the Empire's spiritual essence could survive. Zareth, confident in his lineage, took the throne first. The moment he sat, the throne pulsed violently. Vines of light wrapped around him, and he screamed as memories of his past atrocities. Massacres, betrayals, secret pacts with slavers, flashed across the walls. He was thrown from the throne, unconscious. Then Corwin stepped forward. Lysara reached for him. "You don't have to," she whispered, her violet eyes glistening. "We'll find another way." He squeezed her hand. "There is no other way. Not if I want to stand beside you as your equal, not just your husband." He climbed the dais. The court held its breath. Even the floating attendants froze mid-air. Corwin sat. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the throne glowed. Not gold, not violet, but a soft, warm white. Light spread from it like ripples in a pond, washing over the entire hall. The ancestral core, dormant for months, awoke with a hum that vibrated through every bone in the chamber. Images filled the air, not of war or conquest, but of bridges between worlds, of human and Varelian children playing together, of starships trading instead of fighting. The voice of the core, ancient and genderless, echoed not in words, but in feeling. "He sees us, not as rulers, but as people." Corwin remained seated, unharmed, eyes closed as if listening to a song only he could hear. When he opened them, the entire Senate, save Zareth's faction, knelt. Zareth roared, leaping to his feet. "This is trickery. A human cannot." "He just did," the elder matriarch interrupted, her voice like stone splitting. "The core has spoken. The law is fulfilled. Corwin Vale, consort of Princess Lysara, is hereby regent of the Varelian Empire until the Emperor awakens or a new heir is crowned." Chaos erupted, but not the kind Zareth wanted. Guards loyal to the old ways moved to arrest him, but others, inspired by what they'd witnessed, stood with Corwin. A brawl broke out in the hall, energy blades flashing, robes tearing, ancient artifacts toppling. Corwin didn't flinch. He rose from the throne and walked calmly into the fray, not to fight, but to shield Lysara and command order with a voice that had once calmed dying soldiers on a desert moon. "Enough!" he boomed, and somehow, impossibly, they listened. This empire doesn't need more blood. It needs healing. In the days that followed, Corwin didn't take the throne for himself. He ruled beside Lysara, not above her. He appointed human mediators to work with Varelian diplomats. He opened the palace granaries to feed refugees from war-torn systems. He even invited Zaratha's surviving loyalists to a council, not as prisoners, but as citizens with grievances to air. Some mocked him for it. Others began to see what Lysara had seen all along. Yet peace was fragile. Rumors spread of a secret armada gathering beyond the Helix Nebula, led by Zaratha's exiled brother, a warlord who believed only pure-blood Varelians should rule. And whispers came from the ancestral core itself, warning of a fracture deep within the Empire's spirit, one that no human kindness could mend alone. Corwin knew the battles ahead wouldn't be won in arenas or throne rooms. They'd be won in hearts. And so, one quiet evening, he stood with Lysara on the sky balcony, watching twin moons rise over the capital. "You never wanted this," she said softly, leaning into him. "The power, the titles." He smiled. "I wanted you. Everything else is just paperwork." She laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a summer storm. "You're ridiculous. And you're stuck with me." She turned to him, her white hair catching the moonlight, her purple skin glowing with warmth. Not stuck, chosen. Below them, the city pulsed with life. Aliens of a dozen species walking side by side, markets humming, children chasing floating lanterns. It wasn't perfect, but it was possible. And Corwin, the human no one believed in, held the woman who believed in him, and together, they faced a future neither could have imagined alone. But both would build, one careful, courageous act at a time. Yet danger loomed. The exiled warlord's fleet drew closer. The ancestral core grew restless. And deep in the palace vaults, a sealed prophecy, hidden for centuries, began to glow. Its words written in a language that blended human and Varelian script. It spoke of a union that would either save the Empire or shatter it forever. Corwin didn't know about the prophecy, but he knew this: love wasn't weakness. It was the bravest rebellion of all. And he was just getting started. Weeks passed, and the fragile peace Corwin had woven began to fray at the edges. Though the capital bloomed with cautious optimism, unrest simmered in the outer provinces. Planets that once bowed to Varelian rule now questioned whether a human, a soft-skinned, single-hearted mortal, deserved to guide their destiny. Dissident broadcasts crackled through encrypted channels, calling Corwin the Hollow Regent, a puppet propped up by sentiment rather than strength. Yet Corwin refused to respond with force. Instead, he traveled, not in a warship, but in a modest diplomatic cruiser retrofitted with Terran medical bays and seed vaults. Wherever famine or plague struck, he arrived not with soldiers, but with supplies, engineers, and doctors, human and Varelian alike. Lysara accompanied him whenever she could, her presence a symbol of continuity, but it was Corwin's humility that disarmed hostility. On the sulfur plains of Kethvor, where xenophobic clans had barricaded their cities against offworlders, he walked alone into their gates, unarmed, carrying only a satchel of antibiotics and a recording of their ancestral lullabies, songs he'd painstakingly transcribed from palace archives. The elders wept when they heard their own grandmother's voices, preserved by a human who'd never even set foot on their world before. By dusk, their children were being treated for fever. By dawn, trade routes reopened. Back in the capital, however, whispers turned to shouts. Zarath, though disgraced, had not vanished. From his Gilded House arrest, he fed rumors to the traditionalist factions that Corwin was siphoning imperial resources to Earth, that he planned to replace the Varelian bloodline with human hybrids, that the ancestral core itself had been tampered with using primitive Terran technology. The falsehoods spread like mold in damp air. Then came the bombing. It struck during the Festival of Twin Moons, when the palace courtyards overflowed with citizens of every species, celebrating the Empire's founding with music, dance, and shared feasts. A hidden drone, retrofitted with stolen military-grade plasma cores, detonated near the Grand Fountain. Dozens were injured. 3 died, including a young Varelian girl who had been handing out flower crowns to human visitors. Corwin arrived before the smoke cleared. Kneeling in the soot and shattered crystal, he cradled the girl's body, his face streaked with ash and tears. He didn't speak. He didn't rage. He simply wept, openly, unguardedly, while the crowd watched in stunned silence. In a culture that prized stoicism, his raw grief was more powerful than any decree. Later that night, standing before the Senate, his voice hoarse but steady, he said, "If my presence divides you, I will step down, but not before we find who did this and why, because that child deserved better. You all do." His willingness to relinquish power stunned even his allies. Lasara gripped his arm, her eyes wide with fear. "Don't say that," she pleaded in private. "They'll take it as weakness." "They already think I'm weak," he replied, wiping soot from his sleeve. "But maybe weakness that chooses courage anyway. That's something they can't ignore." His words echoed across the data nets. For the first time, common citizens, shopkeepers, farmers, schoolteachers spoke out. "He mourns our dead like his own," one wrote. "When did a regent last kneel in the dirt for a servant's child?" Petitions flooded the palace. "Keep the human regent. He sees us." The investigation led to a shocking truth. The drone hadn't come from Zaratha's faction. It bore the markings of the Helix exiles, the very armada rumored to be gathering beyond the nebula. Worse, encrypted logs revealed Zarath had been in secret communication with them, not as an ally, but as a pawn. The exiles, led by Malric, Zaratha's exiled brother, had orchestrated the attack to discredit Corwin and ignite civil war, clearing the path for invasion. Corwin called for an emergency council. But this time he didn't stand at the edge of the gallery. He stood at the center of the war chamber, map projections swirling around him like constellations. "We have two choices," he said, pointing to the Helix Nebula on the star chart. "We fortify our borders and wait for them to come, risking everything in one battle. Or we go to them first, not with fleets, with an offer." Zarath, summoned under guard, scoffed. "Malric doesn't negotiate. He devours." "Then we give him something he can't eat," Corwin said. "The truth." Lasara understood first. "The prophecy," she whispered. For centuries, the Varelian royal family had guarded a sealed chamber deep beneath the palace, the Vault of Echoes, where a single obsidian tablet lay inscribed with an ancient warning. "When stars bleed and thrones tremble, the empire shall be saved not by claw or crown, but by the union of unlike hearts, whose child shall speak the first tongue and mend the core." No one knew what it meant. Until now, Corwin and Lasara had been trying to conceive. Month after month, hope had flickered and dimmed. Varelian biology was not kind to interspecies unions. Their reproductive systems were barely compatible. But during Corwin's research into imperial law, he discovered something else. The ancestral core didn't just respond to lineage. It responded to intent, to harmony. And the tablet hinted that the child might not be biological at all. "What if," Corwin said one night, tracing the glowing symbols on a hollow replica of the tablet, "the child is a symbol, a new beginning? What if Malric fears this prophecy because he knows it's true, and he wants to stop it before it starts?" Lasara's eyes widened. "You're saying we don't need a baby. We need a covenant." "Exactly." They devised a plan so audacious. Even the elder matriarch called it madness. Corwin would travel alone to the edge of Helix space, not as a regent but as a supplicant. He would carry no weapons, only the tablet, a recording of the core's resonance, and a message: "Join us." Not as conquerors, as family. Lasara insisted on going with him. "If you die out there," she said, her voice trembling, "I lose more than a husband. I lose the future." "I won't die," he said, kissing her forehead, "because I'm not going to fight. I'm going to listen." The journey took 17 days. His ship, the Dawn Mercy, was small, unarmed, its hull painted white, the Varelian color of truce. As he entered the nebula's crimson haze, Malric's dreadnoughts surrounded him like wolves closing in on a lamb. But Corwin didn't raise shields. He opened a channel. "I'm Corwin Vale," he said, his voice calm despite the sweat on his brow. "I'm here to talk about your sister." Silence. Then, a gruff voice. "You dare speak her name? Your sister Jara," Corwin continued. "She wasn't a traitor. She tried to warn your father about the core's decay. They executed her for it. But her research, it's in the palace archives. I read it. She believed the empire could evolve. That strength wasn't in purity, but in diversity." Another silence. Longer this time. Then, a grudging command. "Bring him aboard." Malric was everything stories claimed. Towering, scarred. His left eye replaced with a glowing red sensor, his voice like grinding gears. But when Corwin showed him Jara's final journal, projected in shimmering script above the command deck, something in the warlord cracked. "She was right," Malric admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "But we've bled too long to turn back now." "You haven't bled enough to stop," Corwin said gently. "But you don't have to bleed more." He played the recording of the ancestral core's resonance, the same one that had accepted him. Malric flinched as if struck. That's Jara's frequency. She encoded her neural pattern into the core before they killed her. Corwin nodded. She's still part of it, waiting for someone to listen. Tears, real, human-like tears, tracked through the warlord's battle scars. Weeks later, the impossible happened. Malric's armada didn't invade. They joined, not as subjects but as partners. Under a treaty drafted jointly by Corwin, Lysara, and Malric, the Helix exiles were granted autonomy, representation in the Senate, and access to the core for spiritual renewal. In return, they pledged to defend the Empire, not as warriors but as guardians. Back in the capital, the people rejoiced. Statues were erected, not of conquerors, but of healers, diplomats, and, to Corwin's embarrassment, one of him kneeling beside the fountain. But the true miracle came 3 months later. Lysara, after years of failed attempts, stood in the palace garden one morning, her hand on her stomach, tears streaming down her face. Corwin rushed to her side. "What is it?" he asked, panic rising. She laughed through her tears. "It's a miracle. The medics confirmed it. I'm with child." Corwin stared, stunned. "But how?" "The core," she whispered. "It aligned our biologies, not by force, by consent." The news spread like starlight. For the first time, the prophecy felt real. The unlikely union had borne fruit, literal and symbolic. The Empire began to heal in ways no one expected. Schools taught both Terran and Varelian histories. Hospitals blended human triage with Varelian bioenergy healing. Even Zareth, watching from his estate, sent a single white flower to the palace, a sign of reluctant respect. But peace, Corwin knew, was never permanent. As he stood on the sky balcony once more, Lysara's hand in his, her belly just beginning to swell with new life, he gazed at the stars and wondered what storms lay ahead. The galaxy was vast, full of old hatreds and new ambitions. Yet, for the first time in centuries, the Varelian Empire wasn't just surviving. It was learning to hope. And somewhere deep in the Vault of Echoes, the obsidian tablet glowed softly, its ancient script shifting, rewriting itself in real time. Not as a prophecy, but as a promise. The Empire shall not be saved by blood alone, but by those who choose to love across the void. As Lysara's pregnancy progressed, the palace transformed, not just in policy, but in spirit. Corwin oversaw the renovation of the Western Wing into a common hearth, a space where citizens of any species could share meals, stories, and grievances without rank or title. Human jazz musicians played alongside Varelian harmonic choirs. Children, some with purple skin and white hair, others with sunburned cheeks and messy brown curls, chased each other through holographic gardens that bloomed with flora from 100 worlds. The air smelled of spiced tea, ozone, and possibility. Yet beneath this fragile harmony, old shadows stirred. Malric's loyalty, though sincere, was tested daily. His warriors, raised on tales of Varelian supremacy, struggled to accept human customs, especially the notion that a regent could apologize, compromise, or kneel beside the wounded. Tensions flared in joint patrols. A brawl broke out in a border outpost when a human medic suggested using Terran antiseptics on a Varelian wound. "You defile our blood with your chemicals?" snarled a Helix veteran. The medic, a soft-spoken woman named Tessa, simply held up a vial. "It's not chemicals, it's care." The standoff ended when Malric himself arrived, silenced his warrior with a single look, and let Tessa treat the wound. But the incident spread. Worse still, the ancestral core began to flicker. At first, it was subtle. A dimming in the throne room's ambient light, a lag in the core's responses during communion rituals. Then came the tremors. Vibrations that shook the palace foundations without warning, followed by bursts of static in the neural link archives. Elders whispered that the core was rejecting the impure union. Traditionalists claimed the unborn child was a blight on sacred lineage. Corwin refused to believe it. He spent nights in the core chamber, barefoot on the cold obsidian floor, speaking to the pulsing heart of the Empire as if it were a friend. "You chose me," he'd say. "You showed us a future together. Don't abandon us now." One evening, as he sat with his palm pressed against the warm stone, the core responded. Not with images, but with a single, clear thought that echoed in his mind like a memory not his own. "The fracture is not within. It is without," he told Lysara at once. She, too, had felt it. A dissonance in her dreams, a sense of something watching from beyond the known systems. Malric confirmed it. His scouts had detected anomalous energy signatures near the Ortvale, a region long thought barren. The readings matched no known empire, no recorded species. Only a repeating signal, faint but insistent, pulsing in a rhythm that mimicked the core's own frequency, yet distorted, like a song played backward. "It's mimicking us," Malric growled during a war council. "Like a predator wearing the skin of its prey." Corwin frowned. "Or a mirror." The truth came from an unexpected source. A derelict probe recovered by Terran deep-range scouts, drifting near the Vale's edge. Its data core, though damaged, contained fragments of a lost expedition, one funded not by any government, but by the Terran Xenopsych Institute decades ago. The mission, to find evidence of non-biological intelligence. What they found was something else entirely. The final log, patched together by palace archivists, showed a human scientist, gaunt, eyes wild, recording from a ship shrouded in unnatural darkness. "They're not alive," she whispered. "Not like us. They're echoes. Sentient patterns born from cosmic radiation and abandoned belief. They feed on certainty, on dogma. They latch onto civilizations that worship absolutes. Pure blood, divine right, eternal war, and amplify those beliefs until the society tears itself apart from the inside." She paused, coughing blood. "We tried to warn Earth, but they called us mad. So we came here to the Varelian frontier. Their core is strong, too strong. It's broadcasting its unity across the galaxy like a beacon, and they are coming to shatter it." The transmission ended with static, and a sound like glass breaking. Corwin understood instantly. The core's instability wasn't a rejection of him or his child. It was under siege. The fracture was psychic, a slow corrosion of collective belief, amplified by the entity now lurking at the edge of their space. It had exploited every doubt, every whisper of human weakness, every buried fear of impurity, and woven them into a psychic weapon. And it was growing stronger. Lasara, now visibly pregnant, placed a hand on his arm. "We can't fight an idea with weapons." "No," Corwin agreed, "but we can fight it with truth." He called for a unity convergence, a gathering not of armies, but of storytellers, artists, healers, and children. From every corner of the empire, they came. Poets from methane-rich moons, sand sculptors from desert worlds, human folk singers, Varelian dreamweavers. For 7 days, they filled the capital with creation. Murals painted on force fields, symphonies blending plasma resonance and acoustic strings, plays that reimagined old myths with human and alien heroes side by side. The core responded. Its light steadied. The tremors ceased. But the entity, sensing its influence waning, struck back. On the final night of the convergence, as Corwin and Lasara stood on the sky balcony, watching a dance of light and shadow performed by refugee orphans, the stars themselves seemed to blink out. A wave of psychic pressure slammed into the planet. Not physical but emotional. Doubt, grief, rage. Citizens dropped to their knees, overwhelmed by sudden memories of loss, betrayal, fear. Even Corwin staggered, clutching his chest as visions of Earth burning, of failing Lasara in the desert, flooded his mind. Then, a new voice cut through the storm. Small, clear, unafraid. From Lasara's womb, a pulse of calm radiated outward. Not sound, but feeling. Warmth, recognition. The unborn child, still months from birth, reached out with a mind already attuned to both worlds, and whispered a single word into the collective consciousness. Together, the psychic wave shattered like ice under sunlight. In the silence that followed, the stars returned. The core blazed brighter than ever, and across the empire, people looked at one another. Not as Varelian or human, pure or hybrid, but as neighbors who had just weathered a storm side by side. The entity beyond the veil recoiled. The signal vanished. But Corwin knew it wasn't gone, only waiting. As the months passed, Lasara's belly swelled with life that defied biology and prophecy alike. The child, whose name they would reveal only at birth, kicked with the strength of 2 worlds. Corwin built a crib from reclaimed wood from his old field hospital on Xylos 9 and carved a mobile from Varelian crystal that chimed in harmonic thirds. One evening, as they sat in the nursery-to-be, Lasara leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever wonder what she'll be like?" Corwin corrected gently. "I don't know, but I hope he laughs like you, and worries too much like me." She smiled. "And if he wants to be a chef? Or a poet? Not a ruler? Then he'll be the first in a long line of rulers who chose something better," Corwin said. Outside, The twin moons rose again over a capital no longer divided. The palace that once mocked a human husband now stood as a testament to what happened when love refused to bow to tradition. Yet in the deepest vault of the palace, the obsidian tablet glowed once more. Its script had changed again. The child is born not to inherit the throne, but to dissolve it, and build a table where all may sit. Corwin didn't see the words, but he felt their truth in his bones. The war wasn't over. It never would be. But for now, in this quiet room filled with starlight and hope, a human man and his alien queen held each other, dreaming of a future where their child wouldn't need to save the Empire, because the Empire would already have learned how to save itself. Years flowed like the twin rivers that wound through the capital, and Corwin and Lysara's love blossomed into a family that defied every prophecy and shattered every doubt. Their first child, Kaelin, born with amethyst-tinted skin, a tuft of white hair, and eyes that shimmered with both human warmth and Varelian depth, was only the beginning. Within a decade, 5 more children filled the palace halls. Lyra, the dreamer who spoke to plants. Riven, the quiet strategist who built star maps from toy blocks. Twin Soren and Mira, inseparable mischief makers with their father's grin and their mother's stubbornness. And little Alara, born under a double eclipse, whose laughter made the ancestral core hum with joy. The throne, once a symbol of division, was replaced by a great circular table in the palace garden, carved from Terran oak and inlaid with Varelian crystal, where leaders, farmers, healers, and children sat as equals. Corwin never ruled as emperor, nor did Lysara reclaim the crown. Instead, they guided the empire as stewards of unity, their legacy not in conquest, but in compassion. Malric became a beloved uncle, teaching the children martial discipline while sneaking them sweets. Even Zareth, in his final years, attended family feasts, his heart softened by the sight of human and Varelian grandchildren playing without a thought to bloodlines. Their home overflowed with music, burnt stews, Corwin's attempt at Varelian cuisine, bedtime stories in 2 languages, and the joyful chaos of a family that chose each other every day. The core no longer flickered. It sang, a steady harmony woven from countless voices across the stars. And on quiet evenings, Corwin and Lysara still walked the sky balcony, hand in hand, watching their children chase fireflies beneath alien constellations. They had no empire to conquer, no throne to defend. Only peace, deep and enduring, and a love that proved the strongest force in the galaxy wasn't power, but family.